Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be back here in Puerto Rico. I have not been here in over 20 years now. It turns out a very close friend of mine, in fact, the guy who gave me this Guayabera, which still fits apparently, his name is Fernando Cristino Colon Osorio, and in keeping with his Hispanic heritage, he goes on to say Santos Rodriguez. I have to go it from the beginning because I've memorized it from the beginning. Fernando Cristino Colon Osorio Vasquez Cruz Santos Rodriguez, who was born on the island of Culebra and grew up in the barrio of San Juan, got his PhD at University of Massachusetts, and has been a successful engineer in the States ever since. And he introduced me to this island when we taught a 3-day short course on the Mayaguez campus it's about 20 years ago. I also used to be a stronger part of the Computer Society community, and it's great to see so many people. I see Tom Kane's white hair. Dick Eckhouse's not white hair. There he is, right. And if I go on and on, there'll be no time left to talk. Dick said, please be short. I don't know how to be short, so good. Most of you are sitting. Those of you are standing, you may want to pull up the title, The Future of Computer STAR. The STAR is in the Computer Science and Engineering STAR, which means it stands for whatever we want it to mean. The future computer STAR, are we in serious trouble? I think we are. And the STAR in particular in this case, and I've got 4 bullets: computer architecture, what comes next. There are people that are out there who should know better saying that computer architecture is dead. There's no future. Everything that could be done has been done. It's time to just forget it, and we're in web design. Computer education, what are we teaching? Are we teaching? Are students learning? I think we have serious problems with education. Computer engineering, what is an engineer? When I listen to some of the ABET crap that I've been seeing lately, I'm beginning to wonder, what is an engineer? And the Computer Society, I've got some words for that also. So, given the hour and a half I wish to spend on each of these subjects, so what I'm going to try to do, and by the way, questions at any time. If you want to hold it till I get done, you may have forgotten the question by then, but that's also okay. What I'm going to do is I've got a total of 19 transparencies, and at my standard rate, that's 19 hours. So what I've done is I've only got transparency set up here for the first 2 bullets, and which are the things that I may have some relevant stuff to say, and questions on anything as long as you want to go. I understand. I've been told by Dick that I'm keeping you from eating. Maybe there's food here, So anyway, computer architecture. What we hear from those who should know better is computer architecture is dead. One of the gurus from one of the fancy West Coast universities, he says, why do you waste your time on branch prediction? Is it so important to go from 98% accuracy to 99% accuracy? It's in the noise. Turns out it's not in the noise. It turns out that we fetch multiple instructions each cycle. We have a deep pipeline. It turns out that going from 98% to 99% would improve performance by more than a factor of 2 because of all the work that you throw away. It's not about 98% accurate, it's about 2% inaccurate. And when you mispredict, a lot of speculative work gets thrown out. So it's not dead, there's still more to do. Computer architecture, was that a cell phone I heard go off? God damn it. You keep them turned off. Output device. If you want a ball and chain, just get married. Lately there's been talk, is computer architecture research, does it need revitalization? I say no to both of us. Demand, we have not even scratched the surface. The uses of computers, we're just beginning. There's a whole lot more to do. The resources at the bottom, more than 1 billion transistors on a chip today, and increasing. I used to say when the day comes that we have 1 billion transistors on a chip. Now we're past that. Justin Ratner at Intel says when I say 10 billion, nah, be much more than that. Frequencies already we're running at 4 gigahertz, and 10 gigahertz is just around the corner. So, demand, we have not even scratched the surface. In fact, what computer architecture is all about, problems described in natural language, electrons that actually do the work, we're in the middle. Computer architecture is the interface between the two. These gurus say, go for the low-hanging fruit. Forget about branch prediction, etc. Now that I've reached my dotage, I get invited to give these big deal talks at, be a distinguished lecturer in residence at some university. And I'm giving a talk describing my new ideas. The senior professor raises his hand and says, why do you bother? The CAD can't verify the stuff we have out there now. And you're making more sophisticated chips? Make simpler machines. Law of diminishing returns. Look at the transistors on a chip, and you track the benefit of the transistors compared to the growth in number of transistors, and the law of diminishing returns is set in, and on and on. Go for the low-hanging fruit. Easy to get great improvement. Streaming video. Easy problem. We get lots better performance. The problem is that if we go for the low-hanging fruit, the hard problems still remain. So you want the big bucks to do the work, work on the tough problems. CAD can't verify. Make simpler machines. I don't know how many football fans I have here, but the Super Bowl last January. And for the non-football savvy, this game of football is such that one team has the ball, and they try to advance the ball, and the other team tries to stop them. And the quickest way to advance the ball is to have the quarterback throw a pass. And these quarterbacks are getting so good these days, they can throw a pass 60, 70 yards. And the wide receiver goes out to catch the pass. And the defensive team, they have a safety or a cornerback, and he goes out to try to stop the wide receiver from catching the pass. And the wide receiver, he goes, ugh! And the cornerback, he goes, ugh! And some of this and this is cool. And some of it is, nope. And the ref throws the flag and says, and penalizes the offending team. The problem is that for the Super Bowl, you want a ref that has experience. But you also need a ref who can follow the cornerback and the wide receiver go downfield. And with experience, these refs are getting old and tired. And they can't keep up. And so what happens? In the Super Bowl, the ref throws the flag and he gets the foul wrong. It was offensive interference, and he called defensive interference. Changes the whole complexion of the game. Rules committee meets the next day, and they said, what are we going to do about this? We need the experienced ref, but the ref can't keep up. I got it. We'll make a rules change. From now on, in NFL football, a forward pass can go no more than 10 yards. Make simpler machines. I would say make better CAD tools. So the future computer architecture and the future of these chips that are going to have 10 billion transistors on it, the CAD people are going to have to be part of the solution. The CAD coupled with the microarchitects from the get-go. Law of diminishing returns, look more closely. Let me leave this, otherwise you'll never get to eat, and I'll just move on. And you can always get back to, oh, you shouldn't? No? Okay, you don't want to eat, okay? So which one of these you want me to pull off? All of them. It's going to take too long. We'll save it for questions. The naysayers, and these are gurus in computer architecture, are making these statements. What I would suggest is, instead of listening to those gurus, let's look at the VLSI community. The VLSI community has this thing called Moore's Law. Quiz time. Moore's Law. Law of physics, a law of process technology, a law of microarchitecture, a law of psychology. What is it? One right answer. One right answer, all of them. Don't. One right answer. Psychology, absolutely. There's absolutely no reason why Moore's Law, by the way, anybody know what Moore's Law is? Anybody? I'm sorry? No, what was the comment? Who said that? I can't see. Jim Isaac, 18 months ago. Yeah, so you're wrong. Moore's Law has nothing to do with 18 months. I'm going to teach you something tonight. Good. So what Gordon Moore did early on is he looked at a plot on semi-log paper of the growth of the number of transistors on a chip. And he said, on semi-log paper, you got a straight line. Straight line on semi-log paper is an exponential, as you know. And he noticed by the slope of that line that the number of the transistors on a chip was doubling every year. And then 10 years later, he looked again, projected out into the future, and he noticed, in fact, it's a piecewise linear curve. He noticed that from here on, it was doubling every 2 years. But, you know, we're Americans, you know, we take the easy way. 1 year, 2 year, that's too big a story. And so you know the law is 18 months. Gordon never said 18 months. Why does Moore's Law continue to work? You go to Silicon Valley. You got a company. And the boss is saying, double the number of transistors. And the process technology people are saying, we can't. We've run out of steam. No more headroom. Double the number of transistors. We can't. So they work 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. The life expectancy of a marriage in California is measured in hours. And that's gender neutral, by the way. It works both ways. There are women as well as guys that are working on these chips. And they say, we can't do it. He says, if you don't do it and company B down there does it, we'll be flipping hamburgers at McDonald's. So they bust their butt, and sure enough, 2 years later, they've doubled the number of transistors on a chip. Meanwhile, down the other end, company B, double the number of transistors. Can't do it. Do it. If you don't do it and they do it, you'll be flipping hamburgers. And for the last 30 years, 40 years now, it continues to perpetuate itself. Why? Because they don't know it can't be done. And I would argue that in computer architecture, the same thing is true. There's plenty of headroom. I have a data slide. If I didn't have any data slides, you'd think I was a dean. If I had too many data slides, you'd think I was a fresh PhD looking for a job. What this slide shows for the spec benchmarks, for each of the benchmarks, I've got a set of four bars. The one on the left, the black, is using the best branch predictor we've been able to come up with. What the performance is, it's measured in IPC, instructions per cycle. The higher the bar, the better. The yellow bar on the right is what we would do if we had a perfect branch predictor rather than the best branch predictor, and perfect caches rather than the best prefetch algorithms caches that we can find. And so going from real to perfect, this, by the way, is a 16-wide machine, a 16-wide microprocessor, which means each cycle you fetch 16 instructions. And here's this horizontal line for being able to deliver 16 at a time. We're not there. We can't be there because there are other things like faux dependencies that keep one from getting to 16. But one can get close if we could do better with the branch predictor, if we could do better with a caching structure. So from black to yellow, lots of headroom that's still available. Tomorrow's microprocessor, there's a whole lot still to be done. Holistic approach. I showed you problems and electrons. Up to now, changing a little bit already, we've had these walls between the different layers. You know, when Moses, if Moses did come down from Mount Sinai, it never said, "Thou shalt not communicate between the layers." But for some reason, we have established that as you're working in algorithms, you work on algorithms. You're working in microarchitecture, you work on microarchitecture. Where is it written? In my view, 10 years from now, the problems to the electrons, everything inside is going to be the microprocessor, and the designer of the lower level is going to take into account what's needed to solve the problems. I call it the holistic approach. I call these layers the transformation hierarchy because we're transforming problems from natural language to algorithms to a mechanical language, you know, like C or Fortran or COBOL or what's some others? Java. No, Java's a religion, not a language. With 10 billion transistors on a chip, it makes sense to have a subset of that chip devoted to a specific application. So I call the future chip X plus superscalar. In fact, one of the big deal companies that makes DSP chips, they called me to consult. I said, DSP, I can't even spell DSP. You want me to consult on DSP? Because it's not the signal processing we have the problem with. It's the branch prediction, and it's the wide issue, and it's the out-of-order execution, all this other stuff. So the future chip, I don't care whether it's a database chip or a DSP chip or whatever, X plus superscalar, it's going to have that plus all this other general purpose stuff. And again, we can take our marching orders from what's going on in the real world. If I said the refrigerator, would anybody know who I was referring to? Good, William Perry. Played for who? Chicago Bears. Offense or defense? Defense. Defense. And by the way, the American game of football, very different from the European game of football. American, you know, labor union, so they only have to play half the game. You're either a part of the defense or you're part of the offense. When the offense was on the field, William Perry was on the bench. Powered off. And by the way, these future chips, power is an important issue. It does no good. I don't know how many of you into the transistors, but the geometries are so small that it is not the case that you worry as much. Well, you still worry about the switching time as you cross the gate, but the source and drain are so close together that you go in the back door, leakage current. And it's getting so bad that leakage current is overwhelming the actual switching current. So you got to be able to be powered off. That introduces some other problems. But for purposes right now, here's William Perry powered off on the bench when the offense is on the field. Now, some of you said both, because you recall that if the Bears were on the 1-yard line, okay, not the 5-yard line, that's too far back. By the way, not all of you follow football. William Perry, how big was he? How many pounds? 370, 380, 400 pounds. Perry sitting on the bench. The Bears are on the 1-yard line. What do? They power up William Perry. Bring him on the field. hand him the ball, point him toward the goal line. 1 yard, he can do it. 5 yards, he'd never make it. And he crosses the goal line, the ref says 6 points for the Bears. What's the point? The point is that William Perry on offense is a special piece of logic, an ASIC, just for that one problem. But when you need them, you really need them. X plus superscalar. The holistic approach that when you design the microarchitecture of the chip, you take in mind what's going on at the higher level. There's a whole lot of other stuff here. Verification hooks, I mentioned CAD earlier, that's going to be present. Security is an issue. I could spend, this slide is one of my 1 hour, one slide only talks, so I can't get into it too much. If you want questions after I get through, that's fine. Every one of these is an important bullet to what the microprocessor will look like 10 years from now. There is plenty more that can be done. Microcode became a nasty word 25 years ago. It turns out that microcode allows one to require fewer bits of bandwidth from off-chip to on-chip, and then when you need those bits, you can blow it up on the chip in the form of microcode to do the work that needs to be done. So we're going to see more microcode on the chips rather than less microcode. Niagara is a product of Sun Microsystems. I say Niagara X, meaning the nth generation Niagara. It has lots of processes that are very wimpy, each one of them. They're good for certain applications. But there are still times when you need the powerful core microprocessor, and that's Pentium Y. My view, the future chip will have both. So I call it the Niagara X Pentium Y chip. Power awareness is going to be continues to get more critical. As I say, I can talk about that, and we'll see. The point is that computer architecture will always be alive and healthy as long as people can dream. The dreamers are not the architects. The dreamers are everybody in this room who's not an architect, who can think up new applications for machines. And the more powerful machine becomes an enabling condition to allow more dreams to be put forward. And as long as people can dream, and as long as the resources keep getting provided by the process technology people, there's going to be plenty of need for the computer architect. Computer architecture is about the interface between what technology can provide, and what the market demands. And that interface has lots of design points. I can talk about each one of these if we had time. I don't. But the point is that the future is bright for what these chips can be done for. Computer education. Some of you know that this is as time goes by, computer education becomes more and more my hot button. What we hear from those who should know better is that object-oriented is essential. No time for understanding detail. In fact, one of my former colleagues at Michigan, who's now at Riverside, speaking about object-oriented, has this to say: information hiding is all very good, but students need to have some information before they can start hiding it. The real action is in the web. Architecture, operating systems, compilers, old hat. In fact, you know, it used to be that there was a disconnect between some of them like me who believe that you should teach computing bottom up. In fact, I think you and I disagree on this one. Yeah. And Eckhouse says that, no, you teach top down. I say, no, Dick, you teach bottom up. Turns out, if you listen to most of these people, we're both wrong. What they want to do, they want to teach top up. And university education should be a buffet. Kids know what they want. They should be able to take what they want. Wrong. You're the professor, buck stops with you. The reason why you're in the classroom is because supposedly you know better. So this is what we hear, and we continue to see decreasing enrollments. I would argue that the reason why we continue to see decreasing enrollments is because we're doing it wrong. We're starting them with this high-level language, mostly object-oriented. In fact, the first course is the most important course. How you start them is going to tell a lot about whether we keep the good ones or we tell the good ones to go off and, study biology, which is a sexy thing these days. Or we keep the bad ones who don't want to think but just want, a degree, get a job quickly. What we see in the new guidelines, the guidelines is what come out recently from the computer engineering group. All sample schedules, there are 4 sample schedules in those guidelines. They start computing with programming. And the languages are object-oriented, which I've already told you what I think about that. The problem with starting with programming is students aren't learning. They're memorizing. Memorizing is not learning, and it's certainly not understanding. And the good students are turning off. I would argue that introduction in programming in language X is the wrong answer. The approach is almost always top-down. Kids are memorizing. They don't have a clue why their program doesn't work. So what do? They come up with a mess. They go to the TA. TA says, ugh. And what does the TA do? Starts them off, does the first half of the assignment for them. Said, now you finish it. What does the student do? Goes to the other TA. So I said this at one of these universities. I gave a talk about a year or so ago, and one of the faculty, she raised her hand. He says, you teach at Texas where you have lots of money. At our school, they come to me because we can only afford one TA. The effect of memorizing students don't ever get it. If you don't get it 100%, you lose. I gave a talk at Yorktown Heights, and for personal reasons, I flew into Newark. And now I got to get from Newark Airport to the hotel close to Yorktown Heights. Now, there's no way you want to be on the road in New York City or the environs of New York City looking at a map while you're driving. You'll never get there. So I says, I'll memorize, went to MapQuest, I got the 18 instructions. I memorized them. And I picked up the rental car, and I'd memorized the 18 directions, got behind the wheel, and I'm going to get to the hotel close to Yorktown Heights. I had memorized correctly the first 11 directions. That got me to within 3 miles of where I had to be. And then I made the wrong turn because I had not memorized 100% accurately. And for the next hour and a half, it took me to get those last 3 miles. If you don't memorize exactly, you lose. They can't figure out their mistakes. It becomes a cookbook education. Provides no insight into important tools. MATLAB then becomes just a cookbook. Provides no insight into how the embedded processor, which every engineering system has these days, relates to the input sensors, to the stored program, to the actuators that derives further. Provides what's most important, and this is the IEEE. There's a word engineering in that IEEE. And the central idea to engineering, where engineering is different from the rest of the world. If engineering is a science at all, it's a science of trade-offs. And if you don't understand the trade-offs, you've missed a whole lot in your education. And I would argue that this kind of programming instruction does not provide real insight into trade-offs. Notion of state, that's a long subject, so it's vital. It's all about abstraction. But in order to be able to deal at an abstraction level without getting bitten, if something underneath doesn't work, you need to start here and continue to move up. Now, people tell me, yeah, okay, so do you teach quantum mechanics? I say, no, I don't teach quantum mechanics, because that is a level that I don't need to understand. And what do I start with? I start with wall switches. because kids have been doing wall switches since they've been 2 years old. And if you've been doing wall switches since you're 2 years old, you don't quarrel with, dunk, the light goes on, dunk, the light goes off. And that's where I start and I build up. And every place I build, I'm building on what I already understand. We go from concrete to the general, to the abstract. Dykstra and I disagreed on that one. In fact, Dykstra was at Texas, for years before, he got cancer, moved back to Holland and passed away. And he and I used to go like this with respect to this concept. Nonetheless, if you do start at the bottom and move up and you understand the lower levels, then you can cut through the protective layers. I see too many people that they sit at the machine, it goes wrong, they have no idea what the problem is. You start down, you work up, you understand those problems. And I've already beaten this one. Students working in groups, that's an education thing, which I guess I will leave alone today. Why motivated bottom up? By the way, I've been saying bottom up. In order to really do bottom up correctly, it has to be motivated bottom up. That is, you need to not, if you start down here and they don't have any understanding of why you're doing it, their minds can wander. So what I do is motivated bottom up, which is to say what? You start with an overview. Okay? Now you start with an overview. Okay? Now you start at the bottom and go up. Now an overview and go up. Now an overview and go up. So you set the stage, and that's not learning. That's just setting the stage. But the real learning is building on what you already understand. Continually raising the level of abstraction. And understanding is the great enabler, and I would suggest that understanding will go a long way to reversing this declining enrollment thing. Because if they understand, then they can work projects which they get it. And they're causal systems that actually work. And there's nothing that's more fulfilling than getting something to work that you did and seeing the results of what you did. And they don't get that. When I was at Berkeley, some of you know that every 10 years I move. When a school steals me from another school, one of the first perks they say is, we'll give you instant tenure. But I'm old and decrepit. I hear 10 years, so after 10 years, I move on. So during the Berkeley period, some of the faculty didn't like the idea that in the logic design course, they want to wire up these parts. But the connection might be bad. They may forget to plug in, something into the wall socket. There's all kinds of things that can go wrong. God forbid they should use a logic analyzer, Much better if you don't have to screw around with this stuff at all. They can just simulate. And on the screen, everything works fine. No. The student gets a very different understanding of engineering and impression if he's simulating everything rather than actually building and getting it to work. And if they understand, then they can. Students can debug their own programs. The reason why the kids come to the TA or the professor to debug is because they don't know what they did wrong. But if you do this motivated bottom-up approach, they single-step the program. They can see where it went wrong. They can fix it themselves. They can go, wow, because they see where their mistakes are and they can fix them. By the way, students can handle serious meat. This business of trying to sugarcoat and make them think they're an engineer when they're not. Now I understand we have engineering and no more math in engineering because, some people just can't do math, but they want to be engineers, So we shouldn't require them to have a solid foundation in mathematics. Or maybe we'll do physics without the mathematics foundation to it, Yeah, there's physics and there's also this other stuff. Students can handle meat. Students will never complain about being made to work hard if the working hard results in their learning. Give them tedium to do, they'll turn off just like that. But if they're learning and they're understanding, then they'll warm up to it. There is no substitute for a student designing something, design, you know, one of the hallmark of engineering. Getting it wrong, figuring out, you have to understand to be able to figure out, figuring out why they got it wrong, fixing it so it does work. You know, my freshman course, some of you know that this bottom-up approach is the way I do the freshman course. I actually have them do a programming assignment where they write a program to play the game of NIM. You know, NIM, you've got these 3 rows of matchsticks. So what they have on the screen is 3 rows of X's. And what you can do is remove some number of the X's, but it has to be only from one row. It's a 2-person game, and the person removing the last X loses the game. And they actually do that. And I assign that program intentionally so they have to turn it in before they go home for Thanksgiving. So when they go home for Thanksgiving and the old man can say, well, what'd you learn? Let me show you. And they play the game of NIM. And you design that? No glitz. No colors flashing, everything going off. No. Just 3 rows of X's, and you type a digit, and it removes that number of X's back and forth between the kid and his old man, and the kid is proud because he did it, and it works, and he understands it. And wow, does that curb the declining enrollments. By the way, everything I've said, not just EEs, all engineers. In fact, we need to take more responsibility in this community for the courses that the non-EEs. In my university, mechanicals teach their computing, and aero teaches its computing. No, we understand computing. We should be developing the course. Computing, more than just a token exposure to programming. Computing is a core competency for an engineer today. For more than 100 years, probably, well, I don't know how long engineering's been around. I guess it's been around for thousands of years. Pyramids were engineering phenomena, for example. But physics, math, computer technology, it's a core competency. Engineering is about design. I've already said that. Students can have a meaningful design experience if we set it up that way. Engineering is about trade-offs. I've told you that. And there are lots of examples of that. Engineering is about the notion of state. You go from one state, inputs are applied to produce another state. And we can do that within the context of how a computer works. An active learning experience, a real active learning experience, as opposed to this nonsense that what I call the educators talk about, of you wasting valuable class time to let the kids talk among themselves. By the way, you're never teaching in a lecture hall anyway. What you're doing, anybody that teaches by covering the material is probably doing a bad job. You don't have time to cover the material. That's a student's job. What you have time for in a classroom is to teach the tough nuts, the cruxes that they can't get by themselves. The actual learning, that goes on when they work the problem sets late at night in their small groups. That's where the real learning. So this nonsense of active learning, where you get in there and the kids work and they say, okay, now let me give you a pop quiz, A, B, C, D. That's not learning. The level of the question that you can test in that kind of environment is pretty shallow compared to what you expect them to get from working the tough problem set long into the wee hours of the night. Engineers want causal deterministic systems. Everything needs to make sense. They will turn off if it doesn't make sense, and the enrollments are decreasing. Okay, the slide you've been waiting for, my last slide. While I'm at it, nothing to do with anything I've said so far, but it's something I care about. Education is not about feeling good. In fact, it's one of the problems with my country, and not everybody here is from my country. I got a book for you to read called The Learning Gap, written by Stevenson, retired professor of psychology at Michigan, and one of his PhD students who's now a professor of psychology at UCLA. The Learning Gap, what they did is they checked out school systems in the US and China and Japan. They didn't stack the deck against the U.S. The city they picked for the U.S., Minneapolis. They didn't pick East St. Louis. They didn't pick one of these Roxbury in Massachusetts, outside of Boston, inside of Boston, inner city Boston. No, pick Minneapolis, which is one of the more forward-thinking cities in my country. And they compared education in Minneapolis with Sendai and Beijing. And they observed the classrooms, and they talked to the teachers. They asked the teacher in Sendai, what's the most important thing you want the students to come away with? The answer, that they get it. They asked the teacher in the U.S., what's the most important thing you want the kid to come away with? That he feels good about himself. Kid goes to the Blackboard in the U.S. and he doesn't know the answer. What does the teacher do? That's okay, Johnny. You're still a valid human being. You sit here and watch Billy do the problem on the board for you. In Japan, the kid stays at the board with the help of the other students until he gets it. We have a serious problem. It's not about feeling good. You know, every kid's a winner. You know, soccer, you know. At the end of the year, you know, everybody gets a play. At the end of the year, everybody gets a medal. You know, the first time I ran the New York City Marathon, you know, and I finished, they put a medal on me. I went home, gave it to my old man in his 80s at the time. I said, Dad, brought your present. What's this? It's a medal, New York City Marathon. Really? You won the New York City Marathon? I say, no, Dad, they give the medal to everybody who finishes. He looked at me with this look in his eyes. He said, you lost the New York City Marathon? It never occurred to him that he raised a kid to lose, right? We got to get back to that. You get a medal when you win. You don't get a medal when you lose, right? It's not about feeling good. The Blackboard is your friend. Those of you that teach, if you ask your students, they'll tell you your lectures would be improved 1,000-fold if you'd leave your damn laptop at home. PowerPoint. Used to be the professor would take his 30-year-old notes, you know, he's got it here and he puts it on the board. Kid sitting there takes it down. You know, from the notes of the professor to the notes of the students without going through the brains of either. You go to the Blackboard and you can lay it out carefully. You start with a clean slate. It takes you also time to write. This professor that used to have the yellow notes, what's he doing now? He's standing up there, dong, 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 dong. You know, what I want to do is put a chair on the side. Let him sit there, invent a metronome that'll do this for him. You know? It'll be just as valuable. Real active learning I've already talked about. A couple of other things. You know, we live in a crazy world right now. And I'm tired of engineers saying, you know, we just invented technology. It's these other people who screw it up. Engineers need to take more humanities courses. We need to be engaged in what the hell's going on in this world that we live in. And it's not enough to just, you know, throw it over the wall. Well, political correctness, that's an hour in itself. So I will entertain questions about any of the above. Thank you very much. Richard, go ahead.
You know, you still have my permission to use all the material like you're doing. But at least I would like you to get it correct. I'm not a bottom-up person like you, or a top-down person like I said. I'm a muddle-out person.
And in fact, so Dick is absolutely right, actually. In fact, if the truth were known, I'm probably a muddled-out person also. And in fact, you know, I saw Mike Clancy, who's a big educator. In fact, Mike has been at Berkeley. Mike instantly never finished his PhD. He finally decided that research is not something he's interested in. He was still a PhD student at Stanford. He was working with Knuth, actually, and then took the job at Berkeley and got into teaching lower division courses, and he's been a tremendous success story. And he asked the question, how do you keep them interested? And so that's my answer, the motivated. But you're also absolutely right. What you're getting at, of course, is that what you want to do is both. You want to understand the fundamentals before. Just up here alone, you're memorizing, you're not learning. So you got to get this. Similarly, when you get down here, sometimes it helps to move up to see the bigger picture, then move back down, and that's what you mean by muddled out. And you're absolutely right. So I overstate it to some extent, and you're indeed correct in correcting me on it. But the battle that I'm fighting is such that, first of all, there are too many people that want top up. That's the first thing. And then the other thing is this, start with an object-oriented language, and the kids really don't have a clue, and the teacher, who probably doesn't have a clue himself, it's okay to say himself rather than himself or herself when I say something negative, right? Yeah. And so they're coming away with not really ever getting it. So to push that, I say motivated bottom up. Right? Yes, sir.
In the spirit of your first slide in the star, so what is it that's wrong with embedded computer engineering?
So I hinted at that. It's part of the political correctness nonsense that if I could do any, well, I was going to overstate that also. I was going to say if I could do anything, I'd get rid of that. There's other things I may want to get rid of first. But an engineer needs to have a foundation. And to try to, well, you know, in fact, I said it about the mathematics, and that's a big part of it, is that it's not so important to build this strong foundation as it is to be inclusive. That we live in this inclusive environment. In fact, one of the big companies just came out with an ad. Wanted, VLSI designer. You know, must know Verilog, must understand physical electronics, must do this, must be female. That was the ad. Must be female. I wonder if the ACLU is going to get on their case for that, you know, the way they did with the Hooters ad, you know. That is to say, there's nothing specific about female genitalia that relate to being a VLSI designer. But in this sense of being all-inclusive, we tend to forget the core values of the discipline. And I would argue that there's this one university that they wanted to get accredited, and, you know, physics. You need a lab course. Well, they taught physics without the lab. Their argument, you know, physics with or without the lab, physics is still a lab course. I'm sorry, lab science. So physics is a lab science. Whether you have the lab, immaterial. So what I'm getting at in the spirit of that first slide is that engineering, to be an engineer, one has to have a foundation. And we are, in the spirit of being too inclusive, we're forgetting what an engineer really has to have in that foundation. And I find that pretty unacceptable. And yet I face it all the time. Tom?
Yeah, it's indeed a pleasure to have you. And my wife and I talked to you in the back, and we very much enjoyed your talk, which is no surprise. I really admire the back to basics. I think it's great. Let me take you to a different place. There is this controversy about Moore's law. And between two big companies. And one says they're going to continue on with Patt as projected versus doing parallel architecture. You being a guy who's looking up and were most recently used, what's your argument about this? What do you think it's going to go?
Yeah, so people have been speaking about the death of Moore's law for the last 30 years. You know, you know, Moore's law is fine today, but 5 years from now, it's all over. We're still not measuring these channels in angstroms, but someday we will. So certainly Moore's law can't go on forever. But the thing of it is that engineers with this foundation that I would argue for is going to come up with an ingenious solution. It may not be silicon. It may be who knows what. But so what I care about architecture, I've got the base technology, and it may be a different, undoubtedly will be a different base technology. People have problems, base technology, my job is the middle. I'll always have work, all right? Where's it going to go? So I talked to that a little bit on that slide of the future, if I can find it. Huh? Yeah, let me find that. So I don't even know where it is. It's somewhere in here. So where did I talk about it? One place was, that's right, this hierarchy and a large amount of stuff to do a particular task. The other thing I mentioned was Niagara X Pentium Y. So there is no question in my mind that parallel computing is here. You know, parallel computing has been around for a long time. To do parallel computing correctly requires work at the higher levels. So you got to break down the problem into parallel tasks that you can do. We have historically been doing it at the compiler level, where a lot of the information has already been thrown away. We should be doing it at the algorithm level, not the compiler level. All right? That's not, the real answer, we should be doing it at both levels. Okay? Second of all, I think, you know, Amdahl's law. Amdahl said that a problem generally has a part to it that can go as fast as you've got resources to apply to it. In fact, if you have infinite resources to apply to it, it takes 0 time. And a part that you can do nothing about, the serial bottleneck. So, and that's been proven, you know, many, many times. Most applications have both parts. So Niagara X Pentium Y. Niagara X for handling the embarrassingly parallel part. And there are lots of problems associated with that also, which takes us another hour to get into. Not the least of which is the communication between the parts. And the part that's going to work on that tough nut where the operations have to be done sequentially. So what do I see the future? What I said, Niagara X Pentium Y, both on the same chip. By the way, IBM's introduced this cell processor. Now, don't make a mistake of thinking the cell processor is an example of what I'm talking about. The cell processor has these parallel vector processing units, but their single processor, the PowerPC processor, is not a balls-out processor. It's a very Mickey Mouse PowerPC. So if you took the cell processor, replaced the PowerPC wimpy with a PowerPC strong, that's what I think the future is. All right? Question? Sure. Mike? An easy question. From Mike? You believe that? Go ahead.
Do you have something to do with Texas winning football national championship last January?
Did I flunk Vince Young in class? No, I don't get football players in my classroom. I frankly think that it's out of control, college football on some of these campuses, ours being one of them. But that in itself, no. I had nothing to do with us winning the.
Like an expert in football.
Well, so my parents were immigrants. That's a whole other talk, by the way. The strength of my country is the immigrants that came here and built my country. And now we don't seem to understand that anymore, but that's a whole other subject. But I was born in this country. I was born in the U.S. And so, you know, as an American, I learned the game of football. And, yeah, on Saturday afternoon, I'm watching college football. Yeah. So, yes, I love football, but I don't confuse football with computer architecture or computer education. Question. Pradeep.
What do you think of quantum computing?
Quantum computing. So far, it's a sexy idea looking for a problem. So I'm not bright enough to understand quantum computing. So quantum computing suggests, see, I come from this business that a bit, you can store in this bit, I don't care whether it's a magnetic core or a flip-flop or whatever, You store or a capacitor with a charge or no charge. You store a 1 or a 0. I don't understand this business of storing whatever the hell you want it to be stored. Right? That's exactly what I've just told you. A qubit has a 0 and a 1 both depending on what it is that you want at the moment that you happen to want it. So I don't know. So we have this thing in computer science called NP completeness. You know what the N in NP stand for? Non-deterministic. That's right. Non-deterministic. So you take a popular problem that everybody knows about that's NP complete is the encryption problem, which is to say that if we could take a large number and do its prime factorization quickly, all your public key encryption would go poof, and everybody would have access to everybody else. The problem is that factoring this large number is tough. It's NP complete. Let me give you another example. The reason why we call something NP complete, by the way, is there are a collection of problems, all of which are tough, and if we solved any one of them, a simple transformation would allow us to solve all the others, right? I'll give you another NP complete problem that's easier to understand. Traveling salesman problem. So a traveling salesman wants to visit N cities. What's the order that he should visit each city so as to minimize his total distance? So if I use the U.S. example, supposing the cities are Boston, New York, San Francisco, L.A. Minimizing the distance would not be Boston to L.A. to New York to San Francisco. That doesn't work. You really want to go Boston, New York, San Francisco, L.A., right? If you have N cities, the number of paths there are is N factorial. How do you get, of all those N factorial paths, how do you get the right one? Well, the non-deterministic comes in knowing that to know a path means I pick one of these N factorial paths and I add up all the distances. How about if I could store this value? Let's say it's N bits. Let's say it's 16-bit value. 2 to the 16, 65,000 different possible values. How about if I could pick at each step of the way the right city to visit next? Now, there's N cities. Now there's N minus 1 next. So what I'll do is I will store these N minus 1 distances in this one place. And then from there, I'll store the next one correctly. What am I trying to say? That in this value, I'm storing non-deterministically, by magic, exactly what I need. It's a 0 or it's a 1, depending on what I need. And if I do that, I can solve the traveling salesman problem in linear time. It takes me N minus 1 additions. See? Let me finish. In order to be able to do that, I got to be able to, in each bit, store a 0 and a 1 simultaneously. Now, Heisenberg spoke to that. That's quantum mechanics. Yeah, I understand. I don't really understand. I believe. I trust the physicists that, yeah, the Heisenberg's uncertainty principle holds. What I don't know how to do is take this thing called a qubit and let it be a 0 and a 1 both at the same time and have it all come together. If somebody can show that that in fact is the case, then yeah. So, am I glad that there are some people working in quantum computing? Sure, because that may be the future. I don't see how to get from here to there in any time soon. Your turn. No. Oh, okay. Yeah. Question. Okay, I guess we're done. Thank you very much.